In this Still Serving, we look at the life and times of John Garcia. A founding member of the Vietnam Veterans of New Mexico, he was the first New Mexico Secretary of Veterans Services and more recently, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington.
When you know that the guy next to you and yourself, you're willing to give your life for that person, that's a different bond. That's a different kind of brotherhood that's been tested. You may not have served in the same battle, but you were in the battle. You may not have heard or felt the same pain, but you felt the same pain. There's a certain brotherhood, sisterhood to service to country, to men and women that wore the American uniform.
I was a Marine. I defended our embassy in Iraq.
I was in the Army. I was a combat photographer in Somalia.
We did a lot of good over there.
I saw a fellow soldier save the life of a child.
That's why I'm still serving.
And that's why I'm still serving.
These are the stories of true American heroes, of men and women who served in the U.S. Armed Forces, veterans now, still serving their fellow Americans.
When you're 18, you're raised very idealistically, and it was a different world for me. You learn to adapt, you learn to adjust, you learn what brotherhood really means, I think. I think Vietnam forged me. It's like baptism by fire, you know, you come out stronger for it. There's no black and white, there's just gray. And I think commitment and duty, someone's word is his bond. I am who I am because of my service to my country. I'm proud of the fact that I'm a Vietnam vet, and that I served my country, and I served honorably.
John Garcia served in the U.S. Army's 4th Infantry Division in the Central Highlands of South Vietnam from 1969 to 1971.
You know, when I got home from Vietnam, one of the first things I did was 10 days later I got married. And so I was married for 6 months, still in the military, and had to finish off my last 6 months in Fort Carson, Colorado.
Upon returning home, John found, like most Vietnam vets, that they weren't welcome in the anti-war culture of the early 1970s.
You know, I was 19 years old, 20 years old, married now, for 6 months out of the military. So the first thing I had to do was go to school and get a job, which I found to be very difficult. One, because I was a veteran from Vietnam. And so I went to the university to apply, you know, for my benefits, and only to find out that being a Vietnam vet, the college professor didn't want you in his classroom. Because I remember when he came in and wrote his name on the blackboard and gave his name, then he turned around and said, if there's any Vietnam vets in here, I want you out of here. Then I tried to find work, and I couldn't find a job because I was a veteran. And I remember driving down the main street, and everywhere I went, I was in the service, and I had served 2 years, and I'd served in Vietnam. Well, they wouldn't hire you because of the stigma and the image Vietnam vets had at the time. The only reason I found a job was because a World War II veteran had a big sign on his retail door saying, we hire Vietnam vets. And so he hired 5 of us, and we were all former infantry guys. And he said, I remember he called us in and said, if you all do as I tell you, I guarantee you in 2 years you'll have your own retail store. So 2 years later, I found myself managing a retail store with 16 employees.
From managing a retail store to becoming the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Intergovernmental Affairs for the Department of Veterans Affairs, John always remained focused on getting the most out of his life. If not for him, for his brothers who never made it home from the jungles and horror that was Vietnam.
I remember one time being in my bunker with some guys, and we were all talking, what are we going to do when we get home? At that time, I thought, I want to go back to school and I want to go to dental school. That's what I thought. It didn't work out that way, but I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I wanted to do something different, because I think what I realized when you see and hear about a lot of your friends not making it, or you see and learn 58,000 didn't come home, is that we live such a short life, and for us not to give back as much as we can and to make a difference in this life, then what are we doing here? And I don't want to just be sucking air, you know, I want to give back. There's a lot of men and women that didn't come home from Vietnam, and I think as a Vietnam vet, as I met many Vietnam vets that feel the same way. They just want to know they've made a difference in their life. I think Vietnam kind of matured me, set me on a course of commitment to serve, and I think that's very important.
John took his commitment to serve to heart and has spent his life serving his fellow Vietnam veterans.
I've been fortunate enough to come out of New Mexico where a man named Dr. Victor Westphal built a chapel for his son who was killed in Vietnam, and that chapel became the first Vietnam veteran memorial in the country. And I was involved with Dr. Westphal when we got it dedicated as a national memorial monument.
From New Mexico to Washington, D.C., he has spent his life serving his brothers in arms.
I got very involved. I was part of a program called the Vietnam Vet Leadership Program that brought me to D.C. during the Reagan administration. And the Vietnam Vet Leadership Program was to try to change the image of the Vietnam veterans, because at the time it wasn't a good image. Patriotism wasn't good. And so the Vietnam Vet Leadership Program was to create a leadership network and help change the image of veterans that the country had at the time, and that showed that patriotism is good. And part of that group got involved with the Vietnam Vet Wall and building it through Jan Scruggs. I helped bring 135 people, veterans from my state, to the dedication, in which about 200,000 Vietnam vets gathered from all over the country to walk in our own parade and dedicate our own memorial. Vietnam vets built their own wall, their own memorial monument, and we gave it back to the country.
John's efforts to help build the Vietnam Wall helped fallen Vietnam veterans finally get the recognition they deserve. Recently, one of the names on that wall reinforced in John why he has spent his time serving Vietnam veterans.
When I was in Vietnam, I had a young man, we were overrun by some sappers, so I had a young man that was killed, and I was near him and I was with him when he died. But at that time, I didn't want to know anybody, and I want to get close to anybody. And so I didn't bother to get to know who he was or his name. All I knew is he was from a state of California, and all I knew was he was the only son of a family. So it took me 40 years to try to find him. And for 40 years, I tried to find who was this guy. I couldn't get him out of my mind. I didn't want to know who he was, but it took me 40 years to try to find out who he was. And I went to the Vietnam Vet Memorial Foundation one day and asked if they could help me find this person, if I knew the date, and I did. And they were able to find KIAs that died in Vietnam on this particular day, August 6th. And we found 12 names, and we weeded it down, and we were able to go through other documents, and we were able to pinpoint and find the person. And when they found his name and they told me his name, I was stunned by it. And so I walked 3 miles to the Vietnam Vet Wall to find his name again and touch it and to remember him. And to me, it was very moving because I searched for him for 40 years. I didn't want to know who he was then, but now I'll never forget him. Seems like I've been involved in trying to bring my veterans home ever since then. And that's part of the commitment, I think, of service to country.
John has continued to serve veterans to this day, organizing and participating in events to raise awareness for Vietnam veterans to ensure they get the care and benefits they earned.
Early in the month of December, we got a phone call that Kennedy Center was going to have their Kennedy's Honor program, the 36th annual, and they were going to recognize Carlos Santana, defined a lot of the music that came out of the 60s and 70s, during the Vietnam era, and also songwriter Billy Joel. But they wanted to have 50 Vietnam vets, and they wanted to see if we can help identify and find some veterans who would like to be on stage with Garth Brooks, who was going to sing a special tribute to Billy Joel. And one of the songs was Goodnight Saigon. And so in a matter of a day, it was like a chain reaction. One vet, told two more vets, that told five more vets, and in a matter of a day we had 50 Vietnam vets that volunteered to meet for the first time at the Kennedy Center on a Saturday to do rehearsal. None of us ever knew each other other than the fact that we all served in Vietnam together. But within an hour, you would have thought we all served together. You know, we all served in Vietnam, different periods of time, different locations, but we were immediately one again. We were all like brothers in arms together again. And we were a little older, a little grayer, but we knew we were all there to represent not just ourselves, but the many veterans, Vietnam veterans, particularly around the country, and the 58,000 that names are etched on the wall here in Washington, D.C. When we were done, one of our guys called us all to attention, and we rendered a salute to Billy Joel and the president. And we did a about face, and we walked out to watch us all saluting in unison Billy Joel and the president at the same time, and then having the president salute us back was just an honor. But it was as if all Vietnam veterans were being saluted back, and the audience was honoring all Vietnam veterans.
John Garcia recently left the Department of Veterans Affairs to continue his service to veterans in the private industry. From everything he has accomplished to everything he will accomplish, we thank John Garcia for still serving.